Celebrity voice impersonation not an endorsement.
Why go to a single furniture store when you can go to Big Sandy Superstore? Shop and compare America's top 5 mattress brands, plus Nectar and Purple. And choose from over 22,000 in-stock appliances from the top brands at the guaranteed lowest price. Or furnish the room of your dreams with a large selection of American-built furniture. With financing plans for just about anyone, there's nowhere else quite like it. Big Sandy Superstore.
Celebrity voice impersonation not an endorsement.
Why go to a single furniture store when you can go to Big Sandy Superstore? Shop and compare America's top 5 mattress brands, plus Nectar and Purple. And choose from over 22,000 in-stock appliances from the top brands at the guaranteed lowest price. Or furnish the room of your dreams with a large selection of American-built furniture. With financing plans for just about anyone, there's nowhere else quite like it. Big Sandy Superstore.
Welcome to the #1 podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city, so I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
Just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're gonna lose. Coming down the stretch, you're gonna lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, here to discuss Michigan State's final non-conference game against Indiana State Sycamores. It's the first rematch between the teams since the 1979 Classic National Championship game with Magic versus Bird. But before we begin, we'd like to thank Brian Scalacci, who gave us a one-time gift via Venmo. Thanks, Brian, and all of you who support the show. Check out tffinots.com/support if you'd like to find ways to support the show as well. We'd also like to welcome a new sponsor to the show, the Squeegee Squad, which we'll talk about later. However, before we begin discussing the game, let's talk about the startling news that came out days after MSU's last game against Stony Brook. Jeremy Fears was back home in Joliet, Illinois over the holiday break, gathering with some friends at someone's house on early Saturday morning, I guess it was, when a masked individual came into the house and, by all reports, just started randomly shooting. From the report I saw from Jeremy's dad, it sounds as if the assailant was shooting randomly, hitting like refrigerators, TVs, the wall. Unfortunately, he hit Jeremy Fears in the thigh and a young woman in the abdomen. Fortunately, both young adults were rushed to the hospital, recovered fully. However, the bullet that hit Fears lodged in his, what I can only assume is his femur, requiring a long surgery to extract it. And according to a statement from his fathers, Fears will be out 3 months, which is pretty much the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. You haven't seen anything official beyond that one interview that his father gave. But there was some footage released of Jeremy leaving the hospital, which is great in and of itself, that he was able to leave. I think it was the day after surgery.
Yeah.
And that's great that he was able to leave, but you're the doctor here, not me. But I would say from looking at the way he was moving, I can believe 3 months. It did not look like this is something he's going to shake off in a couple of weeks. So that seems reasonable to me. Obviously, I mean, we could spend days talking about different aspects of this, and it doesn't do us any good to do so. Just right. A senseless, ridiculous act that thankfully could have been much worse, but wasn't. One thing that his father said, and again, we're relying on that here, and nothing, no other verification, but I don't see why he'd have a reason to misstate it. is that supposedly the shot that Jeremy took missed a major artery by like an inch. And
Yep.
if it had been there rather than where it entered him, this could have been a much, much worse situation. So that's,
yeah, for sure.
obviously it goes way beyond basketball or any of that stuff. We've been fortunate enough to have Jeremy on this program. He's, in our interaction with him, I think he was every bit the person that Tom Izzo has talked about as an engaging kid. You could see very easily the leadership qualities, and we've seen it in his play. I mean, I think he's, from a basketball standpoint, which admittedly is the far, far lesser in element in terms of importance here. From a basketball standpoint, the timing obviously could not have been worse, because I think he was coming off his best game. He had, if you recall, he had 10 assists. I think he had 1 turnover. And he's been doing this for a while, where he just looks, we've talked about it here, how comfortable he looked, very assertive in running Michigan State's break. He's been lights out defensively, and you could just see him continuing to grow game in, game out. Obviously, we're not going to see any more growth on the court, but and this stuff gets into the realm of cliches, so I don't want to take it too far, but I would bet, knowing the little bit that I do about him, that he's going to take this and use it somehow, some way as fuel, as a player, as a person. That's what I would suspect, is that this is going to end up being something that is a building block. And I don't want to compare the events, because they're very different, but longtime MSU fans will remember the rollover that Mateen Cleaves was in as a high school senior on a visit to Michigan, where he was in a vehicle with some Michigan players, and it was a Ford Explorer that rolled over on the highway. His back was hurt, and that ended up, basically, it didn't wipe out his senior year of high school and his freshman year of Michigan State, but it severely compromised him. He was wearing a brace at times. I mean, he was not even close to the same player, and he was never really the same player athletically as he was before that injury. But I also think that it fueled Mateen Cleaves, and I think it was such a big part of his story that I wonder if he was always a really driven kid, but I wonder if going through that incident, being tested that way, perhaps was part of what made him so relentless in terms of trying to win a championship at Michigan State, and trying to, get himself back to the level where he could be drafted in the first round and play in the NBA. All those things he did. This is a different situation in some ways, but there are a lot of corollaries between those two guys. We've talked about even when Jeremy was being recruited. And in some weird way, I think this may end up being another one, that it's a severe challenge. Thank God it wasn't worse. And we can talk, lightly about, when he comes back and all of that. Thank God we're able to talk about that. But I won't be surprised if he uses it in that way.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question about that. Certainly seems like the type of individual he is. And certainly we are all sort of shaped by our past and what happens to us and how we respond to that. And without, wandering too far into the realm of speculation, I watched the video. I thought he was moving really well. If anything, he looked a little clunky on crutches, because it looked like it was kind of, he's not used to them.
Yeah.
But I thought he was able to navigate pretty easily all the obstacles, walking the stairs and things like that. So I thought he looked really good, and I wouldn't close the door on the possibility of seeing him this season.
Okay.
Not as having no idea as far as what happened, exactly, and what the damage and those sorts of things. With an athlete like that, of course, the big question is if it's what sort of the extent of damages to the bone. Obviously they'll heal, and if there's any other damage to soft tissue like muscles and things like that. But my impression is that it sounds like there was just sort of damage to the bone itself, and so that will heal. It's just a matter of when is it safe to do high impact basketball stuff. I mean, imagine he'll be walking on it pretty soon. It's just a matter of when you can actually do the stuff that you need to do at the level that he plans to do it, and how quickly you can get back to all the other sort of things you do, lateral, moving side to side, and back and forth, all those kind of things you need to do to be effective. My guess is, though, that this would not be as career changing, altering, injury as other things.
Okay, and that was what I was going to ask you for your take on that.
That'd be my hunch.
Okay.
But when I get a hold of one of my orthopedic friends, I will ask them if they know if they have a hunch too. But again, it is total speculation because we have, none of us saw what the damage was, and so it's just a guess. But I would. Very little information has been made available. For sure. But of course, he's young, he's an athlete, he's, got excellent balance. All those sorts of things are going to make it a lot easier for his recovery than someone who's 75 who has the same thing happen, obviously. And I would say, again, just watching the video, he looked comfortable, which is a little surprising. Maybe he had a lot of pain meds and stuff on board, but he didn't look like he was struggling from things you'd worry about, like balance or strength. He looked like and in general, I would think if it's a pretty localized surgery, which it probably was, I would think that your recovery would be pretty good. I mean, I think the muscle is pretty forgiving. You've got it in your quads. So anyway, all that said, we don't know. He'll obviously be out for some time, and it may get to the point where it's beyond where it's reasonable for him to come back. I think even if it's 8 weeks, or we're looking at March, and then how do you get reintegrated? Can you what is your fitness, et cetera, et cetera. But much like Jackson Kohler, I think you have to see him practicing, how he does practicing, and then when you feel comfortable with him coming back and playing. But I think in a difference from him and Jackson, it's probably going to be more we're going to look at the film. Does it look like the healing process is effective? If it is, when are you cleared in the sense that we feel comfortable that you can put high impact on it, versus a Jackson Kohler or like Akins or Hall last year at the feet, where you have to it's sort of more nebulous when it's okay to come back, when the pain is gone, you can do what you need to do. I think that will be less an issue as more just when they feel it's advisable to get back on your feet.
I would also say this, strictly from a basketball point of view, like the first thing that goes when you're going through a period of inactivity is the shot. If you're unable to shoot for a long period of time, it will take a while for that to come back, usually. That was not a particular strength of Jeremy's game anyway. Mm-hmm. Right. If he were able physically, and this is again in the realm of wild speculation, I'm gonna take the little bit we've heard at face value and assume that the odds are extremely low. But if he were able to, let's say, be back by the end of February, physically, I do think there's a chance that they could actually play him. Because the things that he does are not as likely to atrophy as, say, if it was Tyson Walker. If it was Tyson Walker, I'd say, hey, it's going to be tough for that shot to come back that quickly if he's had to take. And the other thing, too, is in fairness, he might not really be taking all that time off from shooting anyway, because sometimes that is something that kids are able to do while they're still recovering, is they're actually
for sure.
shoot. Right. They're not moving very much, but they can shoot. But that was just my point about Jeremy's game at this point, his development. The biggest thing to me, obviously, the number one thing is his health, generally speaking. That's the thing we care about the most. It looks like that's going to be fine. So then when you move on to the basketball realm, I think the biggest thing is, well, you just want him to have a normal off season and heading into next year, because his role next year is going to be much bigger. I think that looks, from the little bit we know right now, that would seem to be very much on the table as a strong possibility that, by the time April rolls around, he's full go. And that's really the biggest thing. If you get him back this year, make a little contribution, that's a huge bonus. But I just want him to have, for his development, for Michigan State's development, I want him to have as normal an off season as possible, because as much as he's helped this year, next year, he's going to be a critical piece, and they really need him. The other thing, too, that I would say about this, because I saw a handful of people making this point, which I disagreed with on social media, was, oh, this is terrible. He's losing all these reps. It's so important for a freshman. And normally I would agree with that, but I think that there's a big difference between Jeremy Fears and, say, Xavier Booker. Xavier Booker, this would be pretty devastating, because he's just now starting to find his sea legs a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think whatever reps he gets going forward could be hugely important for his development. To me, Jeremy Fears, pretty much from day one, was ready to go.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful he got whatever time he was able to get in November or December. But I don't feel like, boy, he really needed those minutes to take a step forward, so next year he's ready to play a bigger role. No, he was ready. He could handle a bigger role than he's been given, honestly. It's that Michigan State's got so many guards that they don't ask that of him. But if Jeremy Fears, if the Illinois coaching staff had been smarter than they are, in the end, they didn't want to take a commitment from him because they didn't think he could shoot well enough, which is still mind-blowing to me. But if he was on that team that so desperately needs a point guard, I think Jeremy Fears is a 25-minute-a-night guy. I think he could handle that right now.
Definitely.
Or could have before this incident. So, I'm not trying to, sunny side up this thing, but I really don't think this is going to be a major deal in his development. I just don't.
Yeah.
I think that he's already a kid that understands what's needed from him, understands how to play at this level. Yes, he's got, he needs to improve his shooting. There's improvement that needs to happen with him, but this is not a guy who's in, as I said, Xavier Booker's situation, where every opportunity that he's on the floor is a chance to really take necessary steps toward being a functional player. Jeremy Fears is functional, period. More than functional.
Yeah, it's actually been remarkable how comfortable he looks out on the court this season.
Honestly, I've gone back in my mind and tried to think about it. Freshman point guards that have looked as comfortable as he has in the Tom Izzo era. Kalen Lucas was pretty comfortable as a very different kind of player, but he was pretty comfortable as a freshman, and man, not too many others. Mateen Cleaves had physical issues, so that limited him. Marcus Taylor was pretty good as a freshman, what he played. So he would be up there. Not a lot of other guys. I mean, Cassius was offensively fine, but you remember he really struggled defensively his first 2 years. So I'm not saying Jeremy is better than all of those guys, but in terms of looking comfortable and doing all the things that Michigan State requires for a player at that position, yeah, he's right up there.
Yeah, I think the thing, and just comparing him to Trey Holloman, who are different players, but just the fact on offense, even when he's not looking for a shot, it doesn't look like he ever ends up in a position where he looks like, oh, should I shoot? Should I not shoot? You know, there's never that.
Right.
It always seems fluid with him. It always seems like he's comfortable with, you know, who he is and what he's out there to do. Like you said, he knows what his role is. And so anyway, you know, we'll be talking about Jeremy quite a bit throughout the season. I imagine after about 2 weeks, we're going to get a better idea what the rotation is going to look like as far from the guard position and, you know, as the pieces fall into place.
Well,
and so,
that's an interesting component, which maybe we should spend a second talking about. A lot of speculation about that. This is what I think. This puts Michigan State's guard rotation basically back to where it was last year in this sense. You've got the 3 starters. You've got Trey Holloman. And then you're going to have one bigger wing. I happen to think it's going to largely be Cohen Carr, since that's what he's been doing anyway. Mm-hmm. I don't think, and I've seen people speculate about the idea of, well, especially with Jackson Kohler, you know, supposedly coming back soon, does that maybe free up Malik Hall to play some minutes on the wing? Theoretically possible, because he's done it before, but I tend to think it will not go that way, mostly because Malik has played virtually no wing at all this year, and Cohen Carr has. Yeah. So I don't know why this would cause them to all of a sudden say, well, let's switch it up. I don't think so. I think what we're going to see is a combination. I didn't look at the number of minutes Jeremy's averaging. I'm going to guess it was somewhere between 15 and 20. I think that's a safe assumption. So that's what you've got to cover. And I think the way that gets covered is you probably see Cohen Carr play a little bit more. And then I think the other 4 guards will see their minutes rise a little bit. It's not a huge deal to cover, say, 18 minutes a game between 5 guys. Yeah. You know, you're basically talking about between 3 and 4 minutes more per guy per game, if you were doing it equitably, and I'm not sure they will, but it'll be some combination of that. The good news is they're in much better position in one important way than they were a year ago, in that Trey Holloman is a very different player offensively.
Yes, offensively, yes, right.
Yeah, and so you've got that pure guard who. Well, and not only is he a different player in terms of his scoring, all of that, but he's now really well-versed in playing both on and off the ball. So he could cover any of those spots, you know, either the wing spots or the point. He's been doing that. In fact, he's been playing less point this year because of Jeremy. Yeah. But I feel very comfortable with him as the point guard. I think he's shown an improved ability and willingness to penetrate, which is something they need from him. His shooting obviously is leaps and bounds better, and he's very confident in letting it fly. He doesn't have any hesitation. And we've commented since he got here that he's so reliable in terms of avoiding mistakes that I think he's actually a very, very good option as a backup. And then, of course, they could also go to Tyson more on the ball than they have thus far. Mm-hmm. That's not ideal, because I think you want him in a scoring mode, but they certainly have that as an option. You could even do it with Jaden Akins if push came to shove. I mean, they really are blessed with a lot of guys who can handle that. So that's one bit of a silver lining in this situation, is that I don't feel as if it means all of a sudden, wow, they're really caught short with point guard options. They had a ton of them coming into the season, and they've still got a lot of them. So even with Jeremy out of the equation. So I feel like they're pretty good, better than they were last year to handle this. Probably the biggest question is going to be, how much more do they get from Cohen Carr? Because he's obviously a very different kind of player. But you know, I'm not someone who's going to feel badly about more opportunities for Cohen Carr. I think that he's done a lot of impressive things already, and I think there's a lot of room for growth. Again, one thing that's occurred to me that maybe will be a benefit to Michigan State in this, if Cohen's playing a little more on the wing, you would think there's the possibility that it could impact Michigan State's rebounding in a positive way, which is something they need.
Yeah.
They do need to be, we've talked about it a lot, they need to be a better rebounding team at both ends. And if Cohen's getting more minutes, there's a chance that helps. You know, you're not as good maybe in other areas, but that's one that I think could be a positive. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're definitely worse in jump shooting, like you're about saying. But
but not that
the other
much.
thing.
I mean, Jeremy wasn't taking a ton of jumpers. You know?
No, that's true. I wonder too. We are on the brink, we think, of Jackson Kohler. I haven't seen reports if he's practicing, if he's really. I know they had kind of tentatively said he was going to come back for the Penn State game. This certainly unclogs things a little bit. I know it's a different position, but from a minutes distribution and stuff, you can see a little bit more where you might see Jackson come in. It might be a little easier for him to work his way into the lineup a little bit, especially early. It's just going to be a few minutes here and there, I imagine. But this you could see a little bit room made by pushing people down a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, it's possible
only if they move Malik Hall to the wing. I don't think it changes much. And I don't think they're going to do that. No,
you don't think he could go to the 4 to back up Malik? Is what I'm thinking.
Well, then Xavier maybe, but then Xavier Booker's not playing.
No, right.
Keep in mind. So I don't think that this is the thing. I think there have been some people that have looked at this and wanted to see Malik Hall moving to the wing for that reason. Because this means we can play Jackson some and still get Xavier Booker minutes. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I believe that's going to happen. And I don't know that it makes Michigan State better to do that. I mean, let's put it this way. Malik's had his bouts with inconsistency. Does it really feel like this is the best move to make? To say, well, let's put a little more on his plate. And does it make Michigan State that much better? And where you've got an option in Cohen Carr who's been doing it. The other option too, which we haven't talked about, is they could always, I suppose, look now to take the red shirt off Garrick Norman. I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah, and he's injured as far as we know.
Well, right, and I don't know how serious that. My sense is that wasn't a serious injury. That the boot was more precautionary in nature, but. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that this really changes anything for Jackson Kohler. I mean, that's my 2 cents at least. We'll have to see. Yeah. Maybe I'll be wrong, and we'll see Malik Hall playing a lot of wing. I would say this. If Jackson Kohler were for some reason to come out of the gate just smoking hot, really playing well, then maybe that would force Michigan State staff to think about it more. Mm-hmm. But I still see a clogged path in there, unless they were to just decide, well, we're going to sit Book, which I don't know that I would do. I would want to continue giving him some opportunities. I just think it's going to be hard. I think, Jackson missing 2 months when he missed it was really, really tough for him. And I look at this thing now, I don't see easy paths to a lot of minutes. I think they'll try to play him and they'll see what they've got, but I don't. And again, my expectations are very low, not because I don't believe in him as a player, but because he's missed 2 months. And the biggest questions I had about him coming in were all on the defensive end. And I'm going to be surprised. Whatever progress he made over the summer and the fall in that regard, I'm going to be surprised if he's fully up to speed and ready to go on that end immediately. Offensively, I could buy it. Defensively, I got to see it.
Yeah, I think probably still the best route is him making a dent in the 5 and displacing either Cooper or Sissoko their minutes initially. And again, I still am I'm still not convinced we're going to see him on the floor this year until I actually see him on the floor this year.
Me too. People talk about this as if it's, and I understand why, because that's the way Izzo is talked. But when he went back, when he went back into the boot, that didn't look great to me. Yeah. As a sign of where he's at. They admitted, he was feeling a little bit of pain. Okay, well, what does that mean? Sometimes it doesn't mean very much, and sometimes it does. So, I'm with you. The first step is let's see him actually play.
Yeah, I mean, he was still in the boot in the Oakland game, so that's, I think, a little discouraging because
he was still in the boot
not that long ago.
The last game.
Yeah,
the last game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Stony Brook. Yeah.
They had said they were going to keep him in the boot till after Christmas. So now we're after Christmas. Now the rubber's going to hit the road. All
right, so let's talk about Indiana State. So they're visiting Michigan State in Breslin on the 30th. And like I mentioned before, this is a rematch. This is the only games they've played since that national title game in 79. So they're expected to be a contender for the Missouri Valley, who I follow sort of peripherally because my father's alma mater is Drake, who has won the Missouri Valley the last couple of years. They've been very good so far this year. They're 11-1 with their only loss coming by 22 in the opener to Alabama on the road. They've only played one game against a Power 6 opponent, so their opposition has not been super strong, but they've been winning all those games. And their best player, Robbie Avila, was not playing against Alabama, so take that for what it's worth. They're ranked 59th overall in Ken Pom, compared to Michigan State is 21st, so Michigan State has definitely gone up quite a bit from the early days. They're 23rd in the net, so that actually makes them a pretty good opponent for Michigan State if they do well in the Missouri Valley. They're 33rd on offense, Ken Pom, but only 96th on defense. On offense, they shoot threes well. Boy, this sounds familiar. They're third in three-point shooting at 41.4%. They're sixth from twos, so they're hitting shots from everywhere. They also shoot 76% from the line, which is much better than Michigan State's 60-some%. They've done a solid job in limiting mistakes this season at number 90 in turnover percentage. They also get to the line quite a bit with a ranking of 62nd in free throw attempts or field goal attempts. The one thing they do not do well is offensive rebounding, where they don't even try. They're ranked 332nd in offensive rebounding. On defense, not as good. Like I mentioned, they're 96. They're 88th against threes, 156 against twos, and their block percentage is 344, which has got to be just about what Oakland was, I think, so basically no rim protection. And they've done a good job on the glass. They've done a lot of turnovers at 88th, but they don't get many steals, and so I'm not quite sure what that means. They play at very fast pace. They're number 30th in tempo overall and 15th in average length of offensive possession. So in many ways, they kind of look a little bit like Stony Brook, but a better, higher quality team.
Much better, yeah.
Finally, Josh Schertz, he's the coach for the Sycamores. He's in his third year. He's done really well. This is a team that was really terrible for a long, long time. They were very much an afterthought in the MVC. I think his first year, so he coached very successfully at the D2 level, 13 years, won 80+% of his games in conference as well, went to the tournament 9 times, Final Four 3 times, and made to the title game once. They were 11-20 his first year, 23-13 last year. And so, he's not only are they, expected to be much better this year and compete for the title in the conference and make an NCAA tournament appearance, but he's also young. He's only 47. So I think like Byington from James Madison, this is a guy who is a reasonable assumption that he will not be at Indiana State for very long if he continues his success.
Keep your eye on him. Now, I would say, the Missouri Valley does a better job because it's a better league than most mid-majors. I believe I saw it's, I don't know if this is net. I think it was Ken Pom. It's 9th in the country right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good. That means you're one, and there have been lots of years in recent seasons where it's been even better than that.
Yeah.
Those schools, for the most part, really, really care about basketball, and they support it. And so sometimes those schools are able to keep coaches longer than you would think. I go back to Wichita State when they were part of the Missouri Valley, and they had Greg Marshall. Now, they had a unique situation with Koch brothers as donors, and They were able to do some things financially not every school would do. But I also can remember when Creighton was in the Missouri Valley,
Yep.
and they kept Dana Altman longer than anybody thought would be possible before he finally did leave. So it's not an automatic, but I look at this guy's profile. I mean, the winning percentage at the D2 level is off the charts. He had a rough year his first year, and then after that, the next 12 were just fantastic. The year you mentioned, he went to the NCAA tournament 9 times, reached the Final Four 3 times. One of the years he didn't was 2020 when it was canceled, just like the Division I tournament. That his team that year was 32-1. So they were probably going to have a great shot to reach another Final Four, maybe win the thing. So he's done a fantastic job there. And then at Indiana State, this is the thing. The Missouri Valley being the kind of league it is, I think it's a lot like, in a way, it's not quite the same level, but it's not too dissimilar from the Big Ten in that to move up quickly is a very difficult thing to do, because it's not just about how much better you're getting as a program, but it's also all the other programs you're competing with and how good they are. So for him to move them in 3 years from way under 500, non-factor in the first year, to last year, very good team. I think they were 11-7 in the league. They went to the CBI, which for a program like Indiana State means something because it's extra games, to this year where they're probably the favorite in that league at this point. That's a pretty fast rise. And so I would think he's going to be on the radar of Power 6 schools. Certainly schools in the Midwest should be taking a long look. I don't, when I look at the Big Ten this year, there aren't a lot of obvious places right now where it feels like a coach is on the ropes. But by March, there could be a different story. And I just wonder if he'll be on the radar or Big 12 schools too, I think would be inclined to look at him, because this is a hell of a start. Getting back to that team, offensively, this has been a fantastic group. I mean, the only thing they don't do well is rebound offensively. And again, they're so bad that they're clearly not trying. They're prioritizing floor balance. But the shooting is crazy. All 5 of their starters are 3-point threats. The lowest percentage among a starter for Indiana State from 3, I believe, is 38%. So that's a problem. To compound it, you can't just load up on the perimeter and say, well, we're going to sell out to take that away, because they also shoot extremely well inside the arc. So, and they draw fouls at a pretty good clip, and they make their foul shots. So it's a tough team to handle. Defensively, they're not nearly as good. There's some real vulnerabilities there. Decent defensive rebounding team. The turnover numbers, I think, are probably a little bit of a mirage, and I suspect, without having viewed a lot of their games, I suspect that you mentioned not a lot of it is steal generated. So that means teams are throwing the ball away, they're traveling, offensive fouls, whatever. I'm going to suspect that that's largely a function of getting opponents to play faster than they want to and making more mistakes than they would normally make, which is fine. That's valid. I don't know that it will be of much use against Michigan State. We'll see. But, that's where the issues are for Indiana State. They're not a horrific defensive team, but they're not very good. So you're basically going into a game against them. I don't quite put them where you would say think of an Iowa traditionally, but it is, in a very general sense, that kind of analysis where you go into it. And at least for me, when I look at this game, I think you're going to need to slow them down a bit. You're not going to shut them down, but you're going to need to slow them down a bit with your defense. And then you're going to really have to execute well offensively. whoever executes better offensively is going to win. And that's normally, I mean, if we're getting simplistic, that's what the game's about, right? But I do think it's going to take, you're going to have to do whatever you can to slow them down a bit when they've got the ball, knowing that they're still going to score. And your offense really needs to exploit them at the other end if you're going to beat Indiana State. One other thought you mentioned, and I do think it's worth mentioning, but it's hard to get a gauge how much it means because it was their second game of the season. And Avila, who I think is their best player, was out. But Alabama took them to the woodshed. Alabama beat them by 22, and that's the only high-major opponent they played. They faced a lot of solid mid-major teams, but no Power Sixes other than Alabama. So, you know, we'll see how they handle stepping up in class and being on the road when they do it. But this is a hell of a challenge for Michigan State. There are a lot of years where you could have had this national championship game rematch and had an easy run. This is not one of them.
They picked the worst possible year to play them.
And they've been back to the NCAA tournament. I don't think a lot. I know they have been since 79, or I'm pretty sure they have been at least once or twice. But I don't think it doesn't seem to me to be a stretch to say this might be their best team since 79. I mean, this is a really good basketball team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm actually just trying to look up and see where they last in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, they were there in 2011 with lost to Syracuse, and they won. They won a game in 2001. They were there in 2000 as well. But that was the only 3 appearances since 79. So they've had 3. They had a good run for 2 years, and then 2011. Yeah, and it's funny. The Missouri Valley is, if you got to be quite a basketball junkie to watch Missouri Valley basketball, but there are a lot of good programs, and the programs that have moved up and out of the Missouri Valley is pretty notable. I mean, you've got Cincinnati, Loyola. Recently, Creighton, as you mentioned before, Louisville came out of the Missouri Valley, as well as Wichita State and Tulsa. So there's some really good basketball that happens in Missouri Valley.
Some of that's ancient history, though. Like Louisville, I don't
Louisville's
remember that being in the Missouri Valley.
That's the 60s. Same with Cincinnati. Yeah.
Right. But I will say in recent years, the Missouri Valley, there is a difference between the Missouri Valley today and the Missouri Valley 10 to 15 years ago.
Yes, for sure.
Because 10 to 15 years ago, you still had Creighton. You may have still had Tulsa. I don't remember. You definitely still had Wichita State.
Mm-hmm.
And Creighton and Wichita State in particular, those are basketball schools. I mean, they support those programs. They've got winning traditions. They both put a lot of players in the NBA. Those were losses, And the Missouri Valley did what they could. Valpo's in the Missouri Valley, I think, right?
Correct.
And they've done some things to try to supplement that. It's still a good league, but maybe not quite what it was, as I say, a decade or so ago when it was a really, really good league.
Yeah, I think Marshall's joined the league as well, so that's sort of as they've been moving out of Division II, and now they're Division I, and so they're just like obviously a stepping block, like all these conferences, the smaller conferences are, right? Whether you want to try and go further, and then a lot of the schools are just really pretty tiny. Like my father's alma mater, Drake, is a pretty small school. It's only a couple thousand kids.
But that is the thing, though, that's different about the Missouri Valley and the vast majority of other mid-major conferences is that the schools really, for the most part, care a great deal about basketball, and they fund it, relatively speaking, and they have fan support. I mean, you would know better than I because I think you pay closer attention to it, but it strikes me that a lot of those schools, if you look around on a random Tuesday night, you put on ESPN and you see a mid-major game from anywhere around the country, what's one of the first things you're going to notice compared to Big Ten basketball? A lot of empty seats.
Yeah.
And that's not normally the case in the Missouri Valley, right?
No.
I mean, they draw. Yeah. Those schools are really well supported, and so
I would argue most of the schools, that's really all they have as far as high
Right.
major revenue sport for men's athletics.
Yeah, because
is
it's not a
pretty much
football
basketball.
league. It's
No,
not a
I mean they're
football league.
obviously all the schools have football teams, but I'm trying to think of any of them right now that are Division
D1.
One football
Yeah.
teams.
Right.
You and I's got a good team. There aren't a whole lot. So yeah, it's definitely. All right. Well, let's talk about the lineups here for the Sycamores. This is a segment brought to you by the Brothers Suggest You Gutters. It's December, almost January, but the Brothers Suggest You Gutters will still take care of your gutter work. Doesn't matter to them as long as it's not like a massive blizzard or something like that. They'll be out there in the ladders, do the stuff that you won't do. So give them a call. You can get a hold of them at brothersgutters.com. Kurt and his team out in the Grand Rapids metro area, and then also Greg and his team in the metro Detroit area. They can repair them, they can replace them, they can clean them out. Whatever you need done for the gutter work. It's not very sexy, not very exciting, but it's something that you'd rather not do, at least if it was me. I hate ladders. I don't like getting up on them, cleaning the things out, especially when it's always cold. It's miserable weather. So they actually do that. They give you great pricing. You get 10% off. You mentioned Final Four when you contact them. So you can find the contact information below. And they're going to be sponsoring the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, which I'll be interested to see what Rod thinks for all these all the players. But we'll begin with the starter, Julian Larry, 6'3 junior, averaging 11.3 points a game on 57, 62, and 74 shooting. It doesn't take a lot of threes, but anyway, 62% is impressive. And he also leads the team in assists, 46, with just 21 turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, definition of a solid guard. Doesn't take a ton of threes, basically right under 2 per game, but when he does take them, he hits them. And he's doing a nice job running. He's not, they don't really have a pure point guard. They play through their center a lot, but 46 to 21 is a pretty good ratio. So this would be the among the guards, he would be the guy. Larry would be the guy that is, for the most part, at the playmaking spot. So, yeah, a lot to like.
Next guard is 5'10 junior transfer from Southern Indiana, Isaiah Swope, leading the team in scoring at 19 points a game on 49, 44, and 73 shooting, and also leads the team in steals at 2 a game.
Yeah, and he is, conversely, he's a much more aggressive shot taker. So he's a top scorer, obviously, and a real threat. Not much of a point guard. His assist numbers are very low. So this is what happens to guys like him. If you're, and he's up a level even, because as you mentioned, he started at Southern Indiana, so an even lower level. When you're 5'10 and you could shoot and score, but you're not a ball handler, it's tough to get a crack at, say, the Big Ten level.
Right.
These are the kind of guys that get lost in that shuffle, because when they're being evaluated as high school players, coaches look at them and say, well, yeah, he can play some, but he doesn't look like he can run my team. And at that size, I can't have that. Well, those guys end up at the Southern Indianas or maybe the Indiana States of the world, and they can still be very, very effective college players. And that's the case here. He's having a hell of a year.
Yeah. Next player is Ryan Cornwell, 6'4", sophomore transfer from South Florida, averaging 15.5 points a game, 4.8 rebounds a game, and shooting 48, 40, and 82.
Yeah, another legitimate threat. Got some decent size on the wing. He played at South Florida, but I believe he's from Indianapolis originally, so kind of came home with this transfer. But yeah, another good guard, another guy scoring double digits, another guy 40% plus from 3. And he gives them a little bit of rebounding on the wing too, which they need.
And now moving to the 4, Jason Kent, 6'8 junior, averaging 12.9 points a game and 6.4 rebounds a game, shooting 54, 37, so man, paltry 37% and 85 from the line. Doesn't take a lot of threes either, but as mentioned there, 37%, he can hit them.
Yeah, this is the worst shooter in their starting lineup from deep. And, 37%, you should have the green light, right? But he's a very important guy in that they don't have a lot of size. This is really not a big team. So for him to be a 6 rebound plus a night guy, they're already, they don't do any offensive rebounding, but on defense, they need to be able to limit possessions at one shot. And he's been very critical for them in that role. Also important defensively, just have another guy with at least some size to try to resist in the paint, So an important player.
And finally, rounding out the starters, Robbie Avila, this player you mentioned, was injured for the opener against Alabama. 6'10", 240-pound sophomore. He averages 16.5 points a game, 6.6 rebounds a game, shooting 58, 47, and 78. Also, as a 5, it leads the team in assists at 4.2 a game to just 2 turnovers a game, so a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio.
Yeah, he's a very interesting player. You're going to immediately notice him if you haven't seen him before. He wears goggles.
Sweet.
He's 6'10", 240, moves very slowly. He'll probably remind some of our deeper fans of, and I'm drawing up, I want to say his name was Krautwig. It was something like that. The kid 2 or 3 years ago for Loyola.
Yeah, right.
Who was their center.
Yeah. He had like that weird mustache or something. That
yes. Avila is somewhat reminiscent of that guy in that he plays at his own pace, and his pace is not fast. But he's very clever. He understands angles. He's, got some bulk to him so he can use his body to create space. And he's very highly, highly skilled. And he plays to his strengths and away from his weaknesses. And if you could do all those things, it doesn't matter so much that you can't run very well or you can't clear a phone book when you jump, to dust off a reference for our older listeners who actually know what a phone book is. But he's a problem. He's the guy to keep in the gutter, in my opinion, because they run so much through him that if you can somehow limit him, you're giving yourself a much better chance to win the game. But if he's able to operate freely and do his thing and set other people up and score some, it could be a long night. So he represents a real challenge for Michigan State to deal with him.
It's surprising, too, that you have a guy who, as you mentioned, plays so slow, yet their team in general plays fast. They must get into their stuff pretty quickly. Like once they get set, they must get things like a shot up pretty fast.
I think that's true. And when we talk about slowly, it's not Wisconsin slow in that, okay, he's standing with the ball, letting seconds drip by, not movement. There's constant movement. It's just that he individually is not a guy who's going to be rim running, or, that's not who he is as a player. I think he makes quick decisions.
Yeah, right. His mind moves faster than his feet.
Yeah,
maybe that's
absolutely. And when you can pass the ball the way he can, it's a cliche, but it's true. Ball moves faster in the air than you can as a person. Right. And that's something that's a strength of his game for sure.
We'll move on to the reserves then. We'll begin with Xavier Bledson, 6'6", fifth-year senior, averaging 7.4 points a game and 2.9 rebounds a game in about 20 minutes, shooting 54, 41, and 80.
Yeah, another guy who could shoot. Very important, though, because, as I mentioned, this team really does not have much size.
Yeah.
And that's, he's 6'6", not huge, but that's if you got to look at this team and say, is there an obvious thing that leaps out at you as a potential problem? It would be that. It would be lack of size. Because outside of Avila, very small.
Yeah, right. And very similar to like when we looked at Oakland who came in and not much size, which, matches the lack of rim protection and then, the rebounding as well. Although Oakland rebounded pretty well against Michigan State. Next would be Jake Wolf, 6'5", fifth-year senior, averaging 2.8 points a game in 13 minutes, shooting 60, 25, and 67.
A guy who struggled hitting shots, but
probably 1 for 4, right?
But he'll give it right. But he'll give them some depth at the guard spot, has a little bit of size there. So he's, set 13, 14 minutes a game. He'll definitely be a factor for them.
Guard Mason Miller is a 6'2 junior, averaging 2.8 points a game in 11 minutes, shoots 42% from the floor and 38% from three.
Yep, and no free throws attempted yet. Again, just backcourt depth. They'll play their guys in the 30s. It's funny, for a team that plays as fast as they do, it's not the Tom Izzo approach where we've got, this guy played 18 minutes off the bench, this guy played 17. They really do ride their starters. They've got some depth, but these guys don't play huge minutes.
Yeah, it always makes you wonder if you can run the team into the ground, if you actually can run counterattack and on them, especially the guys also lumbering.
Exactly, and it's also worth noting. Yes, they play fast, but that can be primarily, playing fast in the half court. Like they get into their offense quickly and they take quick shots. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going up and down the floor. And so if you can get them in a 94-foot game, that might make a difference.
Finally, for players, the reserves is Aaron Gray, 6'7 junior transfer from Niagara. He's played in the last two games, just averaging half a point and a rebound a game, shooting 0% from the floor.
Right. Just recently started playing. We'll probably see him in cameo in a couple minutes because, again, he does bring at least a little bit of size.
Yeah. But, I mean, you look at this minute distribution, if you're paying attention, we have 6 players, 20 plus, and then you've got a 13 and 11-minute player. So really, like you said, very, very short bench. And we're very excited to welcome in our new sponsor of the show, the Squeegee Squad. Troy and his team in the Grand Rapids area are your neighborhood window cleaners. They do commercial, residential, high-rise window cleaning. They do it all. Most window cleaning services just do residential or they just do commercial, but they will do all of it. And so you might have needs at 2 different places. And so they can be your go-to place to take care of your windows. And also not just windows, but they will wash your house. They do power washing. They also do nose to class, which means they're up right next to the windows. So they actually do nice, good cleaning. Also with the house, they use a low pressure power washing with cleaners. So they don't actually have to, pound so hard against your house. And so they get up on the ladders, they do that stuff. So not actually shooting from a long ways away. So that way they can get a nice, good cleaning for your house. And so they do fantastic work. You can find their stuff at squeegeesquad.com/Grand Rapids. You can certainly contact any Squeegee Squad in America, but the deal for 15% off for listeners of the show, if you mention Rebound for your free estimate, that is good through the end of March, which is, really all that we care about is through March. Although, hopefully, we actually have a game in April this year, right? So again, check out the Squeegee Squad. Fantastic business. They'll take care of everything you need to do as far as your window cleaning. We're going to begin here. Rod and I are going to have a competition for who's going to have the best rebounding performance for Michigan State in this game. Who do you predict in this game?
I'm going to go with Malik Hall.
Okay.
And my thinking is I would be inclined to go with one of the 2 centers, except that I think with the frequency with which this team shoots threes, there may be a few more long rebounds than we typically see. At least I hope so, because if there aren't, that means they're hitting them. I was actually on the border of choosing Jaden Akins. 1, because of that, and 2, because I think he's overdue for a big rebounding game. But I'm going to go with Malik.
Yeah, I think I actually was thinking about going with Akins, so I was going to see who you're to pick. So I guess we'll go with the guards, or at least not the centers for the little change of pace here. So we'll see what happens. We'll then go on to the 5 keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing, where you should get all your college apparel and Michigan State Spartan apparel. They have all kinds of vintage logos and things like that. You can get on your hoodies, your T-shirts, high quality stuff. Favorite of my family. They're just incredibly comfortable. And in fact, everybody wears them all the time. It's actually kind of funny. I see our logo shirts on whether working out or just walking around the house. So super comfortable gear. You can find all their stuff at nudgeprinting.com. Again, that's nudgeprinting.com. Final 4 is one word to get 20% off your order at checkout. And so check it out. Great Spartans, Gabe and Brittany over at Nudge Printing. That is all Michigan produced stuff. So the 5 keys of the game begin. Number 1 is defend. So I'm not sure what Kevin Pauga has against Tom Izzo, but he seems to just schedule teams that shoot blistering hot from three. Because I think it was like our third team that's 40+% now shooting from three for the season.
Yep.
So obviously defending is going to be the key. And, that if for a team that's this good offensively, obviously that's how you have to neutralize them. And it's been the way that the success for the last 3 games for Michigan State.
Absolutely. You need to keep this momentum going. And, now we've had it's been a 9-day layoff. So that's a challenge, a hell of a challenge to be coming off that much time off. And this is the opponent you're facing. It's not that different really than going into a Big Ten game,
Right.
It's been the key, clearly, to Michigan State's recent turnaround has been the level they've defended at. This is a different kind of challenge. This team doesn't share a lot of similarities to Baylor, let's say, except where their offense is rated,
Right.
Overall. They pose a challenge, I think, primarily for 2 reasons. One, they shoot the ball very well. That's obvious. And that's from everywhere. That's from 3, from 2. Avila gives them a post-up option that not everybody has. Then they've got all these other shooters around him. He's a shooter. So you can get him in pick and pop or trailing maybe in transition. But then on top of that, they move the ball very, very well. So this is not a Baylor team that's going to square you up with a guard on the perimeter and look to just take you to the rim. That's not what they do. They assist on almost 60% of their made field goals. That's not quite a Michigan State number. Michigan State is currently, I think, at 65%, but it's close. And that should give you a sense. Our listeners know how Michigan State plays. In Michigan State, Tom Izzo's system, this isn't true of everybody, and it's not necessary to have a good offense. But the way Michigan State plays, if they're not getting a high assist to made field goal ratio in place, they're probably not playing the way they want to. They can still win without that in a given situation, but that's not what they want. Indiana State has a fairly similar kind of profile. So that tells you that they're moving the ball very, very well. As we mentioned, Avila, their center, is their leading assist guy. And they run a lot through him. So they're going to present a real challenge for MSU. MSU is going to have to be very connected, very aware, can't fall asleep on anybody because all of the top 6 guys will even go to the one reserve that's playing a lot. Everybody can shoot. Everybody can shoot jumpers. So you can't fall asleep if your man is 20 feet from the basket. That guy's a threat because they're all threats. And yet you also can't load up too much to try to take that away because if you do, they'll hurt you inside. So, this is going to be a real challenge of how connected, how focused Michigan State is defensively.
Number 2, the key to the game is the push. As we mentioned before, Indiana State likes to play fast. They're averaging 88 points a game, which is very similar to Baylor was averaging 91, I think, when they faced Michigan State. So in that way, I think, like you said, offensively, pretty similar.
Yeah, again, I don't think they're quite a 94-foot team by design. But if they're taking quick shots and you're getting defensive rebounds, you should have opportunities. Now, I would also expect that floor balance is going to be a priority, but that's okay. It doesn't even necessarily need to lead to layups or dunks for MSU. It's just force these guys to run more than they want to. Take advantage where you can, and then just get the pace of play ramped up in the way that you want it. Indiana State obviously, clearly, is comfortable playing very fast, but I think that's different than saying they want to play a 94-foot game.
Right.
And that's what I think Michigan State wants to do. And it's going to be interesting, too. We've talked about it. One of the things I think Jeremy Fears has done exceptionally well is his mentality every chance he gets to push tempo. the starters have, A.J. Hoggard in particular, has not done that as consistently. He needs to. Now, especially because you no longer have Jeremy. So I want to see MSU's guards really consistently looking to get the ball into the forecourt as fast as possible.
Yeah, and I think, one of the keys to that really is the pass ahead. As you mentioned, it's a lot faster throwing the ball in the air than it is to dribble and to run. And that was something that I feel like AJ was much better at the last
For
2
sure.
years. And this year he's done a little bit less. He's been bringing up himself
For
a little
sure.
bit more.
Yep.
So the third key to the game is Avila himself. So as you mentioned, they're a good balanced team, but he's the key, sort of the fulcrum for what they're doing offensively, and a good passer. And so, I think the question is, how does Michigan State defend him? Do you just dig on him a lot, or, deny him entry to the pass and try and make them work through someone else? It'll be interesting to see what and how he's covered by whom.
Yeah, one thing I would guess is I'd be surprised to see Michigan State doubling him very much.
Yeah, with a good passer for sure.
Good passer and guys who hit shots.
That too.
This isn't Purdue where you're like, all right, guards who we think are fragile and suspect, you got to prove it. No, I don't think you want to do that with these guys. So I think it's going to be a challenge. To me, the biggest thing is, he's probably going to get some of his points. I don't know that you're going to totally shut him down that way. What I'm more concerned about is, does Michigan State allow him to just be shredding them, creating for others as well? If they could limit that, if they can make him kind of one-dimensional and say, okay, you're going to score some points, but we're not letting you, make us pay with your passing as much, that would be a win. But I'm very impressed with him. I think he's a very, very good player.
So the next key to the game is rebounding. So this is something Michigan State has had trouble, certainly, on the defensive end. This is a team that doesn't offensively rebound at all, but we've seen that even this season, where the occasional teams that don't offensive rebound still get some work done against Michigan State. And as you mentioned, I think we both feel that with a lot of 3 attempts that there's going to be the longer rebounds, and so it's going to be important for those guards to really tighten up and make sure they box out well.
That's the part that worries me. Even with a team that just doesn't even bother, part of that is they make a lot of those shots. Well, if Michigan State defends the way I think they can, and make no mistake, Michigan State, this may come as a surprise to some of our listeners, they have been a near elite defensive team. They're 11th overall. They're in the top 50 against both 3s and 2s. So there's a decent chance. Let's put it this way. I'm going to be surprised if Indiana State shoots their seasonal average against Michigan State. I expect Michigan State is going to do some things to limit their success. But that means you've got to end possessions. And anytime you're talking about long rebounds, that's a concern. So, yeah, it's really important that MSU's guards stay home long enough. You want to push, you want to run, but you got to secure those defensive rebounds. You can't let a team that plays offense as well as these guys do. If you're fortunate enough to be getting some misses, you can't let them get second chances. And then at the other end, Indiana State's been a solid defensive rebounding team, not a juggernaut, but solid. But they're not very big.
Yeah.
And we've seen Michigan State intermittently be effective on the offensive glass. I think this is a game where there could be some opportunities. Despite the fact that ISU's been solid there on its defensive glass, I do think there's a chance for Michigan State to do some damage with second chances of its own. So I'd like to see that. And this may be something, as we talked about at the outset, if part of the adjustment for MSU to the absence of Jeremy Fears is Cohen Carr playing a little bit more, well, maybe we start to see more from Cohen as an offensive rebounder if he's on the floor a little more often.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And defensively, you think he should be someone who can stay on someone on the perimeter too, right? I mean, that's been his. They've done well, and they're beat down against Baylor. I mean, not only were they defending the 3 and making the 3 attempts really difficult and awkward, but they were securing all those rebounds as well and still running. You said it all.
Absolutely. No, and again, Baylor's a very different team in some ways than Indiana State, but you're right about some of those fundamentals here being the same.
Yeah, the only difference, I guess, was that Baylor was crashing the boards to try and get those offensive rebounds. They weren't. And so Indiana State, you expect to be a little bit more difficult scoring easy buckets on them, but the other way.
I would agree.
Again, you want to make them run up and down. And so finally, key to the game is offensive balance. So, this Michigan State has had this all season. We can't rely just on the threes, can't just rely just on the twos, and sort of have to try and, again, I think defense is probably more important to help the offensive balance, because it seems they play better offensively when they're playing good defense, but making sure we're not relying one way or the other on that end of the floor.
Well, I think the biggest thing to me is you need point production in the paint to force defenses to respect you inside, which means they can't load up as much on the perimeter, which means you should get higher quality looks from three when you do take them. So it all goes hand in hand, and Michigan State has done a better job in terms of getting the ball into the teeth of the defense, into the paint in recent games. And not surprisingly, its shooting percentages from three have continued to climb as a result. So you're getting better production inside, which is going to tend to lead to better opportunities from the outside. So it's really important that MSU find that balance. And as we've talked about a lot, they don't have that post-up threat, so they've got to do it other ways, primarily via the guards. And they've been doing a better job at that lately. Now, part of that equation was Jeremy Fears was doing a really good job. He's not available, so it puts even more of an onus on AJ, obviously, but also the other three guards have all got to do that job as well.
Yeah, and just final thoughts. I guess, the other thing is you almost say a sixth key to the game is sort of, what is the effect of Fears and what the players, had a, all that sort of is going on as a result. I mean, I think generally they'll respond well, but you never know, I guess, how the response is going to be with something like that happens. I guess probably by the time anyone heard anything that had happened, it sort of was already I guess he was okay in the sense that he was, that was not life-threatening by the time probably anyone had heard any word of it. So from that sense, there's probably less concern than, he's in the ICU for 3 weeks or something like that. But there's definitely going to be a lot of extra emotion in this game, which will, like anything, you can be positive or negative, I suppose, the way you utilize
you never know. You never know how that kind of thing cuts. But yeah, I would imagine there'll be some of that. I don't know that. I haven't seen. Obviously, we're recording this on Wednesday, so we haven't even had Tom Izzo's pregame press conference yet on Indiana State, where I imagine he will disclose a little more. But I'm kind of not expecting him to be on campus for a little while at least. I'm sure he'll want to get back as soon as possible for academic reasons, but also to be around his teammates. But I don't expect he'll be in the building for this game. I wouldn't think.
I'd be surprised.
So maybe the emotional impact will be a little bit muted because of that until, that it's kind of sits this, well, we know he's okay. He's not here. We haven't seen him, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe it'll be a little bit more muted. And whenever that changes, maybe that's when it kicks in a little more. I don't know. It's speculation. And as you said, you never know for sure which way that cuts.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Again, Merry Christmas to everyone. Hopefully you have a Happy New Year coming up here. And Michigan State rings in the new year with a win over Indiana State, which is, going to be a tough game. So just a final reminder to check out our sponsor of the show, the Squeegee Squad. And you can find their information at squeegeesquad.com. You can locate your area. The discount is, of course, for the Grand Rapids area, the Squeegee Squad, that franchise. However, there's franchises all over the country. So you are welcome to contact any of them, and you can ask them for the same deal. I'm not sure, but at least you can get high quality window cleaning and for your business or your home or your high-rise apartment. You can also check out Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. And finally, the brothers that just do gutters for any gutter work that you need. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
Celebrity voice impersonation not an endorsement.
Why go to a single furniture store when you can go to Big Sandy Superstore? Shop and compare America's top 5 mattress brands, plus Nectar and Purple. And choose from over 22,000 in-stock appliances from the top brands at the guaranteed lowest price. Or furnish the room of your dreams with a large selection of American-built furniture. With financing plans for just about anyone, there's nowhere else quite like it. Big Sandy Superstore.
Celebrity voice impersonation not an endorsement.
Why go to a single furniture store when you can go to Big Sandy Superstore? Shop and compare America's top 5 mattress brands, plus Nectar and Purple. And choose from over 22,000 in-stock appliances from the top brands at the guaranteed lowest price. Or furnish the room of your dreams with a large selection of American-built furniture. With financing plans for just about anyone, there's nowhere else quite like it. Big Sandy Superstore.